The recruits jeered, their laughter sharp, slicing into her pride like a blade drawn in the dark. None of them knew who she truly was. None of them could imagine that the girl standing before them had once been surrounded by marble halls, silk sheets, and crystal chandeliers. Her name was Arya Cross, and she'd walked away from it all. The Georgia sun blazed over Iron Vale Training Base, turning the air thick with red dust and burning asphalt. An old Chevy truck, paint-chipped and weary from years of back roads, rolled through the gate. Its tires carried the scars of mud and miles, a quiet testimony of someone escaping a past no one dared to mention. When the gate creaked open, Arya stepped out, her combat boots cracked and frayed of crushed gravel underfoot. A faded gray t-shirt clung to her lean frame. A tattered backpack hung off one shoulder, its zipper held shut by a single piece of paracord. Her black hair, tied low at the nape of her neck, fluttered in the humid air, a few strands falling across her forehead, shadowing eyes as cold and sharp as polished steel. No one at Iron Vale knew she had grown up in luxury, private tutors, world travel, and a family name that could open any door. She carried no trace of that past, just silence. She walked across the field where dozens of new recruits stood, laughing, flexing, shouting. The smell of sweat and gun oil hung in the air. Then came the voice that cracked the silence. "Hey, you lost, sweetheart?" The voice belonged to Jake Mercer, a mountain of a man with a buzz cut and a grin built for cruelty. His words sparked laughter among the crowd. "Logistics team's that way. Well, did you take a wrong turn from the supply depot?" The recruits snickered. One of them, a woman with bright blonde hair tied tight and a sneer sharper than her jawline, whispered loudly enough for all to hear, "Look at those boots. Bet she got 'em from a thrift store." The laughter rolled again. Echoing across the field, Arya said nothing. She stepped into line, her expression blank, her eyes unshaken. When the head instructor, Captain Ray Carter, approached, the air changed. The man was built like a storm, tall, stern, voice deep enough to shake bones. He stopped in front of Arya, his gaze scanning her from head to toe. "What are you doing here?" he barked. "This is advanced combat training, not charity work." His words sparked another round of laughter from the recruits. But Arya didn't flinch. "I'm here to train, sir," she said calmly. Her tone was steady, no arrogance, no fear. Carter snorted, waving her off. "Then fall in. Don't drag my team down." And just like that, she was one of them. But to the recruits, she wasn't one of them at all. She was the outsider. The easy target, the one who didn't belong. Still, Arya's eyes told another story. They weren't the eyes of a lost girl. They were the eyes of someone forged in a fire no one here could comprehend. The first day of training was merciless. A 10-mile run through dust and gravel, followed by push-ups until every muscle trembled. But while others gasped and stumbled, Arya moved like clockwork. Precise, quiet, relentless. Every breath controlled, every motion deliberate. Her boots came untied more than once, and each time she knelt to fix them, the laughter came again. "Guess they don't teach knots in thrift shops," Jake bellowed. She didn't answer, just tied the laces, stood up, and kept running. By the end of the session, the others were slumped in exhaustion. Arya stood tall, her shirt drenched, her breathing steady. A few recruits began to glance her way, not with mockery, but confusion. Who was she? That question lingered long after the whistle blew. That night, as the Georgia sky burned red with sunset, Arya sat alone outside the barracks. The other recruits joked and laughed near the mess hall, but she stared into the fading light. Her eyes distant, lost in memories she could never share, because somewhere out the Georgia sun showed no mercy the next morning. Iron Vale Training Base shimmered under the heat like molten glass, the air thick with red dust and burning iron. Day 2. The real test began. The recruits lined up before dawn, sweat already clinging to their skin. Captain Ray Carter's voice cut through the silence like a thunderclap. 10 miles, no breaks. No excuses, move. The pack surged forward, boots pounding the earth, lungs burning in the heavy air. Arya ran near the middle, her movements smooth, steady, almost mechanical. Her breathing was rhythm, her heart a metronome, but around her, the noise grew, laughter, taunts, and sneers disguised as jokes. Jake Mercer, his broad frame towering ahead, glanced over his shoulder with a smirk. "Try to keep up, thrift store queen," he barked. The group around him chuckled. Arya didn't answer. She never did. Every time her bootlace came loose, she paused, knelt, retied it, fast, efficient. The laughter behind her flared each time. "She's slowing down again. Someone tell her this isn't a fashion show." Still, she pressed forward. Mile after mile, the dust rose around her like a storm, sticking to her skin, her throat, her clothes. But her eyes stayed locked ahead, unwavering. And that's when something shifted while others staggered, gasping for air. Arya's pace never faltered. She wasn't running to prove herself. She was running to remember the weight of a promise made under gunfire long before she ever came to Iron Vale. When they reached the finish line, the recruits collapsed in exhaustion. Arya stopped, calm, quiet, her breathing steady. Captain Carter raised an eyebrow. For the briefest second, his expression faltered. Admiration, maybe even confusion, before he barked, "Refill your canteens. Next test, weapons assembly." The recruits groaned, but no one dared disobey. Inside the weapons shed, rows of M4 rifles gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights. Sergeant Lopez, a man who'd seen more battlefields than birthdays, strode in, stopwatch in hand. "You've got 180 seconds, he said. "Disassemble, reassemble. Don't fumble or you're out." Jake went first. Big hands, confident grin. He tore through the process, parts clanging, fingers fumbling, or seconds. He dropped a pin, cursed under his breath, but raised his head like a champion. Next was Emily, the blonde with the sharp tongue. Her hands trembled. By seconds, she forced a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Then came Arya. The room fell quiet. Even Jake leaned back, arms crossed, smirking. "Let's see what magic the second-hand soldiers got," he whispered. Arya didn't look at him. She placed her palms flat on the table, took a breath, and began, click, slide, pull, separate. Each motion was fluid, graceful, like muscle memory carved into her bones. Metal parts laid out in perfect symmetry. No clatter, no hesitation when she began reassembling. Her fingers moved faster, smooth, surgical. Click, click, lock. The final pin snapped into place. Sergeant Lopez looked down at his stopwatch. Seconds. For a moment, no one spoke. The air itself seemed to pause. "Cross," Lopez muttered, disbelief flickering across his face. "Where did you learn that?" Arya wiped the sweat from her brow with the back of her hand. "Practice." "Sir," she said simply. Her tone wasn't pride. It was truth, but the quiet conviction in her voice sent a ripple through the room. Jake's smirk faltered. Emily's lips parted, words failing her. Whispers spread like wildfire through the recruits. "Did you see that? That was impossible. She's not normal." Sergeant Lopez leaned toward Captain Carter, whispering, "That's not training. That's precision, the kind we used to see in the Shadow Vipers." Carter frowned. "Those aren't even supposed to exist anymore." Lopez didn't answer. His eyes stayed on Arya, who was calmly checking. The third dawn at Iron Vale broke like a challenge, orange light cutting through a haze of dust and smoke. The recruits had slept barely 4 hours. Sweat and fatigue clung to their skin, but Captain Carter's whistle didn't care who was ready. Forest Run. 12 miles, full pack. No excuses. The woods behind Iron Vale were a different world. Roots like knives, air thick with insects, the smell of red clay and pine. It was the kind of place that chewed up arrogance and spat it out in mud. Arya tightened her straps, her gray shirt still stiff from yesterday's sweat. Around her, the recruits groaned, boots scraping gravel as they fell into formation. Jake Mercer shot her a sideways glance, mocking smile, jaw tight. He wasn't laughing this time. He was waiting. "Move," Carter barked, and the line surged forward into the trees. The path twisted through ravines and slopes slick with moss. Every branch seemed to reach for the runners, tearing at sleeves, scraping skin. Within minutes, shirts were soaked, lungs burned, and curses filled the air. Arya's pace never broke. Her breathing stayed smooth, steady, in rhythm with the sound of her boots hitting the earth. Thump, thump, thump. Like the heartbeat of something relentless. But Jake wasn't done. At mile 8, the trail narrowed to a single muddy lane. Jake's frame loomed behind her, heavy boots splashing through puddles. Then with one calculated shove, his shoulders slammed into hers. Arya stumbled. Her foot caught on a root. She hit the ground hard, mud splattering across her face, her shirt, her arms. The shock stole her breath for a second. Behind her, laughter erupted. "Oops," Jake called out, voice dripping with satisfaction. "Watch your step, Cross." More laughter followed, taunting, cruel. The sound echoed between the trees. Arya knelt, wiping mud from her cheek with the back of her hand. For a long moment she stayed there, silent, still. Then she stood. She brushed the dirt off her clothes, tied her bootlace, and started running again. No words, no glare, just that same quiet rhythm. Something about her silence unnerved the others. By mile 10, Jake's laughter had faded. By mile 11, he was panting. By mile 12, she passed him. She crossed the finish line first. Captain Carter looked at the stopwatch, then at Arya, his eyes unreadable. "Noted," he said simply. The others stumbled in, collapsing in the dirt. Jake arrived last, drenched in sweat and pride swallowed whole. Later, at the mess tent, the air buzzed with restless chatter. The recruits avoided looking at Arya, as if her calm had become something dangerous. Emily tried to laugh it off. "Lucky break," she said, voice too loud. "Anyone can win once." No one answered. That night, thunder rolled over the base. The sky cracked open, rain hammering down on canvas tents. It wasn't supposed to stop until morning. But Iron Veil didn't pause for weather. The recruits were called into the open field for night drills. Rain poured down in sheets, soaking uniforms, turning the ground into a swamp. They were ordered to pitch their tents under the storm. Lightning flashed as they worked, mud rising past their ankles, ropes slipping, poles clattering. Arya drove a peg into the ground, her movements precise even as the wind howled. Then another peg rolled away. Someone had kicked it. She looked up. A recruit nearby was laughing, pointing. "Can't even hold on to your stuff." More laughter. Arya retrieved the peg, set it back, hammered it in again. Her eyes calm, unshaken. From the shadows, Mia Torres watched. She saw everything. The shove, the storm. The way Arya never retaliated. When the exercise ended, Mia walked past and quietly set a full water bottle on Arya's crate. No words, no gesture. Just understanding. Arya nodded once, a silent thank you that needed no sound. The storm raged through the night, and when the dawn broke, Iron Veil looked like a battlefield. Mud, wrecked tents, scattered gear, then came the rain had stopped, but Iron Veil's training ground was still soaked in silence. Mud clung to boots, breaths hung in the damp air, and every eye followed the girl standing in the combat circle. Arya Cross, the recruit they mocked, the one with thrift store boots and a quiet stare, was now the center of a storm no one could name. Colonel Nathan Reddick's salute hung in the air longer than it should have. Then slowly he lowered his hand. The lines on his weathered face seemed deeper now, carved by shock and memory. "Shadow Viper," he murmured. "I never thought I'd see that insignia again." Captain Carter stepped forward, voice taut. "Sir, permission to ask, what does that mean?" Reddick turned his gaze toward him. "It means every one of you owes this girl a salute." The recruits froze. Emily's smirk was gone. Jake's fists tightened at his sides, mud dripping from his torn sleeve. Even the wind felt afraid to move. Reddick's voice grew steadier. 15 years ago, the Shadow Viper Division vanished. No record, no names, no graves. Only the stories. They were ghosts, trained for missions that never made the news. Soldiers chosen for what others called impossible. He turned back to Arya. "The mark you wear, it's given only to those who survive the final trial. A test most don't live through." Arya met his eyes, her expression unreadable. "He told me the same thing," she said quietly. "Before he died." The colonel's jaw flexed. "Who was your instructor?" Her answer came like a whisper across the mud. "Commander Rylan Creed." The name landed like a thunderclap. Carter took a step back. Lopez, standing at the edge of the field, lowered his head in disbelief. Creed had been legend, the last known leader of the Shadow Viper Division. Rumor said he vanished during a Black Ops mission overseas. Some said he was executed by his own government to bury secrets too dangerous to speak. And now, his final student stood on Iron Veil soil. The recruits shifted uneasily, torn between awe and fear. Jake's voice broke the silence. You expect us to believe this? She's just some runaway who—" Reddick's glare cut him off. "One more word, recruit, and you'll be digging trenches until the next winter." Jake's mouth shut. Arya bent down, picked up the torn fabric of her shirt, brushed off the mud, and tied it around her waist. "Permission to return to training, sir," she said, tone steady. Reddick studied her for a moment that felt like an eternity. Then he nodded. "Granted." As she walked away, whispers rippled behind her, half fear, half wonder. That night, Ironvale couldn't sleep. Conversations crackled through the barracks like static. Was it real? Shadow Viper? Thought that was a myth. What if she's here on a mission? In the dim light of the sleeping quarters, Jake sat on his bunk, fists clenched. His pride had curdled into rage. "She humiliated me," he hissed. "In front of everyone." Emily leaned against the wall, her earlier arrogance dulled to bitterness. "You saw that mark, Jake. You can't win against that." Jake's eyes narrowed. "Maybe not with fists." Outside, lightning flashed again, but this storm was different. It was human. The next morning, the base awoke to rumors spreading faster than orders. Arya kept her silence, doing every drill, every run, every exercise with the same calm precision. Captain Carter began watching her differently now, less skepticism, more calculation. Even Sergeant Lopez, once dismissive, started timing her drills with careful attention. Mia Torres, however, was the only one who dared to approach her. During a break, she sat beside Arya beneath the shade of a rusted water tower. "You're not like them," Mia said softly. "You don't even flinch." Arya took a sip from her canteen. "Flinching wastes time," Mia hesitated. "That mark on your back, is it true? You were really one of them." Arya looked out toward. The wind changed first. Not everyone noticed, but Arya did. It carried something different. Not the usual Ironvale dust or engine smoke, but the faint metallic scent of surveillance. She had smelled it before, the way the air felt just before a mission went wrong. By the time the others were falling into formation for morning drills, the Watchers were already in place. 2 black SUVs parked just outside the north fence. No markings, no license plates, the kind of vehicles that belong to no one, and everyone. Inside one of them, a man in a gray suit flipped through a thin file stamped with a single word: classified. A photograph slipped from inside. Arya Cross. Eyes sharp, uniform crisp, the faint outline of a tattoo barely visible beneath her collar. He studied it for a moment, then said quietly, "Target confirmed. Proceed with silent observation." Back inside Ironvale, Arya's instincts were already screaming. She could feel the eyes. They were trained, disciplined, patient. Not the kind of gaze that mocked, but the kind that measured. During weapons drills, she kept her back to the wall, her movements deliberate, her senses tuned to the rhythm of the base. Footsteps, commands, the sound of distant engines. Mia noticed. "You're on edge," she whispered during a break. Arya didn't look up. "No, just listening." To what? The kind of silence that means something's coming. That afternoon, Colonel Reddick called Captain Carter into his office. The blinds were drawn, the air thick with unease. On the desk sat a sealed envelope marked Directive, Black Raven. Carter read it once, and his face drained of color. "They want her transferred?" Reddick nodded grimly. "Effective immediately. No explanation. Just an order." Carter frowned. "Sir, if she's who you say she is, if she really trained under Creed, then taking her out of here could be a mistake." Reddick exhaled slowly. "It's not a mistake, Captain. It's a cleanup." Carter looked up sharply. "Cleanup?" Reddick's eyes darkened. The kind that ends with a closed casket and no record. That night, rain returned, and soft at first, then harder, turning the base into a chorus of dripping metal and restless whispers. Inside her barracks, Arya sat cross-legged on her cot, disassembling her sidearm in the dark. Her hands moved from habit, quiet, fast, precise. Every few seconds, she glanced toward the window. Then it happened. A flicker of light on the horizon. Not lightning. A reflection. A lens. Someone was watching through a scope. She slid the sidearm back together, chambered around, and killed the light. Seconds later, a faint crunch echoed from outside. Boots on wet gravel. Her voice was barely a whisper. "They're here." Mia stirred from the next bunk. "What? Stay quiet," Arya said. "And if I don't come back, tell Colonel Reddick that phase echo has begun." Before Mia could answer, Arya was gone. Outside, rain dripped through the floodlights. The base seemed asleep, but Arya knew better. She moved like a shadow, silent, seen. Her senses alive with every shift in the air. Past the supply sheds. Past the motor pool, she saw it. A figure crouched by the fence line, scanning the perimeter with night vision goggles. She slipped behind him, blade in hand, and pressed it lightly against his throat. "Who sent you?" she whispered. The man froze. "No insignia. No ID, just a small patch on his shoulder. A black raven." Her eyes narrowed. "Black Division." The man didn't answer. Instead, he pressed something in his hand. A tiny switch. A flare burst into the sky, and all hell broke loose. Gunfire ripped through the night. Floodlights exploded to life. Alarms screamed across Iron Vale. The base that had been training soldiers was now under siege. Colonel Reddick burst from his quarters, pistol drawn. "Lock down the gates," he roared. "Get every recruit." The morning after the siege, Iron Vale was quiet. Too quiet, smoke curled up from the burned-out trucks. The air thick with the ghost of gunfire. Every bootstep echoed like thunder across the empty training field. The recruits whispered among themselves. Fragments of fear. Genuine confusion. They didn't know who the attackers were, or why they'd come for her. All they knew was that Sarah Kain, the woman they once mocked, had stood her ground when everyone else ran. But behind the shattered windows of the command office, a new storm was building. Colonel Reynolds stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his sharp eyes fixed on the horizon. Across from him, Captain Carter laid a folder on the desk. It was thick, water-stained, and stamped with a word no one had dared read aloud in years. Phase Echo Reynolds' jaw tightened. "Where did you find this?" Carter's voice was low. "One of the attackers dropped it." "They weren't just after her, sir. They were retrieving something." Reynolds flipped open the file. Inside were faded photos, coded documents, and one image that froze him. A black and white shot of a younger Sarah Kain standing beside a man whose face was partly obscured, but whose insignia bore the unmistakable crest of the Black Dagger unit. Reynolds exhaled sharply. "Greed." Outside, the recruits were clearing the debris. Mia worked silently, her gaze often drifting toward Sarah, who sat on the edge of a transport truck, staring at the torn sky like she could read the future in the clouds. Her hands were wrapped in gauze, her boots streaked with dried mud and blood, but her eyes, those steel-gray eyes, burned with quiet fire. Mia hesitated before stepping closer. "You knew this would happen, didn't you?" Sarah looked up slowly. "Not when. Just that it would," Mia frowned. "What's Phase Echo?" For a moment, Sarah said nothing. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she answered, "A ghost I was never supposed to remember." Later that night, the base lights flickered and died. Total blackout, generators sputtered, radios went static. Sarah moved instantly, instinct taking over. She knew this pattern. "Not an attack." Signal. She made her way to the armory, each corridor lit only by the faint glow of emergency lights. The silence was thick enough to choke on. Inside the armory, a red light blinked on a secured terminal, an encrypted transmission waiting to be played. Sarah hesitated, then pressed the key. The screen flickered, and an old video recording came to life, grainy, distorted. The colors washed in static. A man appeared, tall, broad-shouldered, his voice calm but commanding. His face was partly hidden beneath a shadow. "Sarah," he said, "if you're seeing this, then Phase Echo has been activated. That means they found you." Her chest tightened. That voice, she hadn't heard it in years. "Everything they told you was a lie," the man continued. "Black Division didn't dissolve. They went underground, under new command. The same people who erased the Dagger unit now want what we buried." He paused, then leaned closer to the camera. You are the failsafe. The final code is inside you. Your memory, your DNA, your training. They will not stop until they have it." The image glitched, the sound cracking. "If Phase Echo begins, trust no one, not even the uniform beside you. The one who carries the serpent mark. It's already here. The screen went black. Sarah stood motionless. The faint hum of the dead monitors was the only sound in the room. Then she whispered, "You always saw it coming. Didn't you, Creed?" At the same moment, in the surveillance room above the command center, Colonel Reynolds was watching the same feed, rerouted through a hidden channel he didn't know existed. When the message ended, he leaned back in his chair, his face pale, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. "God help us," he muttered. Captain Carter entered. The night swallowed the road whole. No headlights, no sound, only the steady rhythm of two pairs of boots crunching against gravel. Sarah and Mia, moving like ghosts through the pine forests beyond Ironvale's perimeter. The world behind them was chaos. The world ahead? A question painted in shadows. Mia carried only a small pack and a silenced sidearm. Sarah, as always, carried more, not in her hands but in her mind. Fragments of training, flashes of coded memories, the voice of Creed whispering somewhere in the dark. If they ever activate Phase Echo, it means the Shadow Protocol is next. And when that happens, trust no one, not even yourself. By dawn, they reached an abandoned facility buried deep in the Georgia woods. Rusted gates, broken walls, the faint smell of burned circuits and old secrets. A faded sign still hung over the entrance, U.S. Defense Research Command. Project Sable. Sarah stopped, staring at it. Her fingers brushed the letters like she was touching a grave. Mia looked around, confused. "What is this place?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "Where the Black Daggers were born and buried." Inside, the corridors were littered with dust and silence. Broken monitors flickered as if trying to remember their purpose. Mia trailed her flashlight over the cracked walls. "You trained here?" Sarah nodded. "Not all of us, just those who survived selection. Creed believed in breaking you first. Then, seeing what you rebuilt yourself into, they moved deeper into the darkness until they reached a steel door. Sealed by biometric lock." Sarah hesitated, only a moment before pressing her palm to the scanner. A sharp beep. Then on click, the door hissed open. Beyond it lay a room untouched by time. A command terminal still hummed faintly in standby mode. And on the far wall hung a massive insignia, an eagle clutching a dagger, and below it a phrase etched into the metal. "Truth lives in silence." Mia ran her fingers over the console. "Looks like someone wiped the system," Sarah smirked faintly. Creed never trusted digital trails. She crouched beneath the desk, pulled out a hidden compartment, and retrieved an old drive, small, silver, and engraved with a single word, Echo. She inserted it into the console. The screens flickered to life, bathing the room in pale blue light. Creed's voice filled the space.